Hello, everybody. My name is Priyanka Champaneri, and I am the author of The City of Good Death, which is a novel set in India's holy city of Benares. And the story follows the manager of a death hostel, whose name is Pramesh, and he's quietly built a life for himself in the city over the past 10 years with his wife and his 3-year-old daughter. But all of that is soon upended when one day a dead body is pulled out of the Ganga River, and nobody knows who this man is or where he came from or what he was doing in the city. All they can talk about is how he looks exactly like Pramesh. Soon after, a very unwelcome guest takes up residence in the death hostel, and Pramesh finds himself quite literally and figuratively haunted by the ghosts of everything he thought he had left behind when he came to the city 10 years ago. I want to say a big thank you to everybody at my publisher, Restless Books, my agent, Lee Feldman, and the biggest thank you to my date tonight, my mama, Neela Champaneri. It was really hard convincing her to come out to be my date tonight, but man, she's here. I'm also so thrilled to be able to introduce the actor Danesh Razvi, who will be reading an excerpt from my book. In this excerpt, the hostel assistant Mohan has been going through quite a bit of stress in his life. And so like a lot of us, he's taken to eating a lot of random things at a lot of random times a day. And unfortunately, this leads to a lot of not so random side effects of the gastrointestinal variety. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy.
Mohans Problem, an excerpt from The City of Good Death by Priyanka Champaneri. The next day, running errands, Mohan bought more biscuits to replenish his supply. But then, once again, his hands reached out by themselves, snatching up other things he usually bought only for children or for Rani. Bags of roasted cashews, red with masala or speckled with black salt and lime, gram flour fried into crunchy chips and blazing with more masala, an entire box of sweets, sticky jalebi and round laddus, carrot halwa, almond and pistachio barfi. Shoving his purchases deep into a jute bag, laying a newspaper on top to hide the contraband, Mohan walked home. He knew the rules. He was the one to recite the list on the back of each door in the bhavan, to issue gentle reminders for first offences and report further ones to Pramesh. The rule regarding outside food was just as important as the nightly curfew or the instruction to keep the mind fixed in prayer. Someone who is dying must concentrate on the great God, on separating himself from physical attachments, Narinder would explain to an unconvinced guest. Your father cannot sever himself from this life and this world if his mind is fixed on some desired object, much less his neighbor's dinner. Mohan stowed the things away in his steel cabinet, pushing the door firmly shut and continued with his day's duties. That night he lay in bed, alone in the dark, and thought of his job, his secure place in the bhavan, his respect for Pramesh and Shobha, his inclusion in the priest's circle even though he was not their equal. He thought of the dying guests and the sacrifices their families made to bring them to this holy city. He thought of the ghost, of the manager's stress, and of his own inability to help. He had prided himself on being capable, ready to meet any challenge, to ease the lives of those who dwelled in the bhavan. But he hadn't been capable enough, quick enough, to answer a stranger's call at the gate, to realize just how important that stranger was, to usher him in and alert the manager. First, he ate the cashews, alternating between spicy and salty. He finished with 3 pieces of barfi, and only then was he able to sleep. Each succeeding night he ate more, and each day he brought more home. The saltiness, sweetness, and spicy saw the unbridled tingle on the tongue that assailed his senses. He needed these to face the night. By the time he rose for his nightly charade against the ghost-addled pots, the wrappers were disposed of, the scent of chewed cloves covered his breath, and he held in the need to belch until all the guests and Pramesh were back in bed. These things were within his control. Others were not.
Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Ray Feng, and I'm the author of the novel Swimming Back to Trout River. It's a story about the far-flung orbits of a family from China to America, set in the decades before and after China's Cultural Revolution. And it explores the themes of music, migration, and also the obsessions and secrets we carry with us and how they reverberate across time and space. I want to say a big thank you to my agent, Caroline Eisenman, and also to my wonderful editors, Zachary Knoll and Nita Pronovo, both in the US and Canada. And it's been a thrill working with you guys throughout this wonderful journey. And the excerpt you're about to hear is by Leah Lewis. In the scene, the young girl and her grandmother are reflecting on the childhood of the young girl's father. Thank you, everyone.
Grandma could not tell Junie that she hadn't expected Momo to survive his childhood. He was born whimpering instead of bawling, into a world where Japanese bombs flattened buildings and turned electric wires into clotheslines for severed human limbs. What little hair he had on his crown was the color of dilute tea instead of the normal black. It was as if his hair exhausted itself, just pushing out of his scalp, then simply gave up. Grandma knew that even hardy children were plucked off quickly in those years, and she didn't expect better odds for their sickliest-looking son. She delayed naming him for as long as they could, and then simply called him Momo, meaning no hair. On the day that the news of Japan's surrender reached them, a pernicious fever and dysentery was making an all-out assault on Momo's small body. All day he purged all the liquid inside him, his eyes shut against the world, until there seemed to be nothing left to purge. Neighbors came to them with the news of the war being over, but Grandma refused to be consoled that day. Thinking it was for the last time, she sat with Momo on a stool and called out his name, a temporary name for a borrowed child. Momo, Momo, stinking Momo, pooping Momo, she muttered over and over, rocking back and forth, while halfway across the world, confetti rained down onto the pavement as couples embraced and kissed. Besides that fever and the scare with the tigers, Momo had other mishaps that, even in retrospect, brought a clenching to his mother's heart. Like that summer night when they slept on the roof and Momo rolled off the edge of it in his sleep. The house was low, nothing like the buildings they lived in now, but still. Even by the time he took the name with him to school as his official name, now written with more dignified characters, she still touched him differently from the way she did her other sons. It was the kind of touch that was tender, yet ready for a parting.
My name is Honorée Fanonne-Jeffers, and I am the author of The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, a novel about one young black girl, Ailey Pearl Garfield, and her quest to learn both the history of her Afro-Indigenous ancestors and to reconcile that history with her own coming-of-age journey. I'd like to thank my circle of wondrous women: Sarah Burns, my literary agent; Erin Wiggs, my editor at Harper Books; and Jane Byrne, my publicist at HarperCollins, also known as Jane the Great. I'd also like to thank all of the other hard-working, wonderful women who helped to bring this book into existence, including my entire team at Harper Books and HarperCollins. The excerpt that you are about to hear from my novel will be read by the glorious actress Danielle Deadwyler. It is set in the late 1960s in a place simply called the City, and it's told from the point of view of Ailey Pearl's mother, Belle Driscoll Garfield. In the months after she has given birth to her first child, Ailey's big sister, and she is living with Ailey's father in a poverty-stricken African-American neighborhood. There are many changes taking place in this neighborhood, and Belle is both fascinated and bewildered by these changes.
After Dr. King's assassination in the spring of 1968, Belle was forced to confront change. Though weeks had passed since the Reverend's death, and there had been no more riots in the city either, police sirens still rang through Belle's neighborhood. Cops were everywhere, hemming up young men on the sidewalks and beating them for no reason. And there was an entirely new vocabulary, too. Within days of cleaning the riot's debris, sweeping the broken glass, towing away burned-out cars, the young folks in her northern neighborhood had decided they were no longer Negro. Suddenly, they were black with a big B. They began to proclaim themselves black and beautiful and reference Africa at every juncture. Men and women began to refer to each other as brother and sister, titles Belle only heard previously at her home church down in Georgia. They let their hair travel on the metaphorical journey to Africa too. Brothers stopped going to the barbers every week, and sisters stopped pressing. Kinky defiance was in abundance, as was discussed over Patrick Moynihan's report. That ream of paper that white dude working for the man's government had written, insisting that brothers had no power anymore in their own households. Sisters were in charge of families now, Patrick Moynihan had written in his report, though he'd still called black folks Negroes. Sisters called all the shots and paid the bills. Even though Moynihan hadn't used the term castration, he'd implied that sisters were running around with scissors pointed at the crotch levels of brothers. Belle didn't understand the black anxieties tripping through the streets. For example, she carried Jeff's last name, and her mother carried the last name of Belle's father, too. If somebody had asked both women, they would have said their husbands were the heads of their households. However, as Belle did for her small family, her mother handled the finances in her own home. Her father made. He gave the entirety of it to Belle's mother, and she gave him back $5 a week for gas and his walking round money. This covered the cost of those peanut butter candy bars he loved and the beers he drank with his friends on Saturday nights down at the juke joint. Other than that, Belle's mother didn't care what her husband paid for. She told her daughter, if her daddy could chase women with whatever change was left over from that $5, God bless him.
Hi, I'm Violet Kupersmith, and I am the author of Build Your House Around My Body, which is set in Vietnam over a span of 60 years, from the Central Highlands during the colonial era to the contemporary expat circles of Saigon. It is a little bit of a puzzle, a little bit of a revenge story, a lot in between, and it is about haunted forests, haunted houses, and haunted mines. It's doubly wonderful for me to be here tonight because I've gotten the opportunity to meet some of the incredible women who helped make this book possible. So I'd really like to thank everyone from Random House and from the Friedrich Agency. And it's an honor to introduce my reader tonight, the brilliant Hong Jo, who will be reading an excerpt from an early chapter where our protagonist, Winnie, Vietnamese American, is describing some of her new co-workers at the Language Academy in Saigon. Thank you.
It was a relief for Winnie to be able to loathe the cooks in the purest and least complicated of ways. Originally from Oregon, Jeff and Anna Cook had been living in Saigon for 6 years, and the first time they met Winnie, they introduced themselves unprompted as the good kind of expat. Over the following weeks, they had made sure to list all the evidence they had gathered to support this claim. 1. Unlike most of their colleagues, including Winnie, the Cooks had gone to the trouble of acquiring English teaching certifications. 2. They had taken 1.5 years of Vietnamese lessons and reached semi-proficiency, though their language skills were primarily inflicted upon Bakan, their housekeeper. 3. They never went to Bois to sweat on plastic stools next to other foreigners and get drunk on candied-colored vodka cocktails served in plastic buckets. 4. Neither did they spend their holidays at the coastal resort towns whose shorelines were crowded with clubs and whose white sands were strewn with the beer barf of kite-surfing English gap year students. 5. They donned elaborately Velcroed trekking sandals and went tramping through nature preserves and forgotten rural stretches of the north. 6. They documented all of their kayaking and cars climbing and rappelling and put the photographs up on their travel blog. 7. Somehow, in 6 years, they'd only ever gotten their fancy blogging camera stolen once. 8. They had rescued a one-eyed alley dog and named him Goji, and he was now more vaccinated and better fed than most of their students. 9. They smelled like the aloe-scented hand sanitizer with which they anointed themselves constantly, and this was probably the reason why 10. The Cooks had never, ever gotten food poisoning, a fact they particularly enjoyed reminding others of.
I forgot that I had this hat on, and then I put my mask off and my ears are stuck. Hi, I am Trisha Lockwood, and the name of my novel is No One Is Talking About This. The shortest possible description of it is that it's a book about being very inside the internet and then being very outside of it. I'd like to thank the Center for Fiction for hosting us tonight, my editor Paul Slovak, my publicist May Z, and all the people at Riverhead Books. The excerpt you're about to hear is from the very beginning of the novel, when the narrator is stuck inside her computer, and it's read by Alia Shawkat. Thank you.
She opened the portal, and the mind met her more than halfway. Inside it was tropical and snowing, and the first flake of the blizzard of everything landed on her tongue and melted. Close-ups of nail art, a pebble from outer space, a tarantula's compound eyes, a storm like canned peaches on the surface of Jupiter, Van Gogh's The Potato Eaters, a chihuahua perched on a man's erection, a garage door spray-painted with the words, "Stop! Don't email my wife!" Why did the portal feel so private when you only entered it when you needed to be everywhere? She felt along the solid green marble of the day for the hairline crack that might let her out. This could not be forced. Outside, the air hung swagged and the clouds sat in piles of couch stuffing, and in the south of the sky there was a tender spot where a rainbow wanted to happen. Then, 3 sips of coffee and a window opened. "I'm convinced the world is getting too full, LOL. Her brother texted her, the one who obliterated himself at the end of every day with a personal comic called Fireball. Capitalism. It was important to hate it, even though it was how you got money. Slowly, she found herself moving toward a position so philosophical, even Jesus couldn't have held it. That she must hate capitalism while at the same time loving film montages set in department stores. Politics. The trouble was that they had a dictator now, which, according to some people, white, they had never had before, and according to other people, everyone else, they had only ever been having constantly, since the beginning of the world. Her stupidity panicked her, as well as the way her voice now sounded when she talked to people who hadn't stopped being stupid yet. The problem was that the dictator was very funny, which had maybe always been true of all dictators. Absurdism, she thought. Suddenly, all those Russian novels where a man turns into a teaspoonful of blackberry jam at a country house began to make sense.
I'm Jackie Polzin, the author of Brood. Brood is a story about a woman who tends to her small flock of chickens while confronting the end of the possibility of becoming a mother. It's a story about grief and its loneliness and the power of practicing care for others. I would love to thank Lee Boudreau, my editor, for being such a fantastic friend and amazing support to me through this project. All of the Friedrich Agency here in the house tonight, Molly Friedrich, Lucy Carson, Hannah Bredasani, Marin Takakawa, and Heather Carr. Thank you so much. These women are a powerful force. And also to my sister, Jamie Polzin, who is my lifelong confidant and taking such good care of me on my visit to New York. It is with great excitement I introduce Marin, Ireland, reading an excerpt from Brood. In this scene, the narrator has just discovered one of her beloved 4 chickens dead.
At sundown on the coldest nights, I returned to the coop to throw 4 handfuls of corn to the floor, 1 palm of grain for each chicken, though it stands to reason via rank and file that Miss Hennepin County gets a good deal more and Gam Gam a good deal less. Once eaten, the corn burns hot like a furnace, warming the chickens from the inside out as they roost through the night. I approached the door of the coop with no trace of the morning's alarm, though the frost was still thick on the window, had melted only in the warmest hour of the day, then frozen again in a burst of stars. The chickens greeted me with a chorus of garbled noise. I pried the 4-cornered lid from the bucket of corn. Oh, the corn makes them happy. The garble gave way to the singular tuck-tuck-tuck of pleasure at each and every kernel. Gam Gam lay in the corner, could not be lured with the clatter and scatter of corn. My nearness did not provoke her, nor my shadow as it fell on top of her. I reached in toward her, then it seemed I reached right through her, beyond her flat feathers, until I touched the very meat of her. She was cold, firm and cold. The neighbors watched me carry the clear plastic bag containing Gam Gam's body from the coop to the house. I had placed her in clear plastic so that her presence in the freezer would not be mistaken for something else. They did not notice the bag contained the lifeless form of our youngest, dearest chicken, though we spoke over the low-lying fence regarding the next winter storm and the shoveling it might require. Percy and I took Gam Gam, frozen and frosted in sheer plastic, to the veterinary clinic at the university. By the time we traversed the many bleached hallways to the diagnostic unit, her body was soft and wet. We paid $500 to be shocked by the youth of the doctor, who told us the tests revealed nothing at all. It is a small, albeit costly, comfort to learn our ignorance is on par with the ignorance all around us. She was my favorite chicken, Percy said. I don't have a favorite, I said. But it had been Gam Gam.
My name is Kirstin Valdez Quade. What a privilege to be here tonight and to have my book placed in the company of such beautiful work. I am the author of The 5 Wounds, which centers on a family in a village in northern New Mexico. Amadeo is an unemployed ne'er-do-well who has big plans to change his life when his 15-year-old daughter Angel shows up on his doorstep, unannounced and enormously pregnant. And the novel follows an eventful year in the life of the Padilla family. I want to thank my agent, the wonderful Denise Shannon, who has championed my work from the beginning, and my editor, Jill Bielowski, who all those years ago asked if I'd ever considered extending my short story into a novel. And I'd like to also just thank the whole extraordinary team at Norton. The excerpt you're about to hear is read by Daphne Rubin-Vega. It is an Angel's point of view, and it takes place at Smart Starts, the teen parenting program she attends. And maybe the only thing you should know is that Angel is beginning to fall in love with her classmate, Lizette. Thank you.
Angel pinches the underside of her chin as she thinks it's journaling time. And Brianna has told them to make a list of things that they need to make their own and their babies' lives better. The first few are easy. 1, GED or high school diploma and college degree. 2, a godmother. 3, a support system. 4, a car. 5, a driver's license. 6, a house. 7, a job. Here Angel is stumped. If she got a job, who would take care of the baby? So she adds 8. Free babysitter, a good one. But there is no such thing. Not really, not unless your mom or grandma doesn't work. Even Angel knows that. Briefly, she considers her father, then dismisses the thought. Christy and Trinity are whispering. They're best friends and knew each other from before Smart Starts. We got pregnant like the same month, they're always telling people, which is either a crazy fluke or an organizational feat. Both possibilities depress Angel. Who'd like to share? Asks Brianna. Jen raises her hand, tucking her silky, mousy hair behind her large white ear, preparing herself for the stage. An education, Jen smiles, anticipating Brianna's praise. A cross dangles from her neck, and in the lobes of those stuck-out ears, diamond studs glint. Even though Angel knows they probably aren't real, knows she could get a pair herself at the mall, she's still jealous. Right, drawls Lizette. Education, I forgot that one. Angel grins and tries to telegraph her approval to Lizette, but Lizette's beautiful green eyes are half closed, like a lizard's. On her left hand, Jen wears a promise ring with a dinky little amethyst. It's my birthstone, she says, as if none of the rest of them were born in months with birthstones. She's going to marry her boyfriend, Jared, whom she met at church and who picks her up every afternoon when Smart Starts lets out. He's a senior and works after school installing car stereos, and once he paused at the curb. He never gets out of the car or even looks up, just attends to his own stereo while Jen climbs in. Not that Angel's own child's father is any better than a car stereo installing Christian. Her stomach churns whenever she thinks of Ryan Johnson. The way in geometry he always sat in the front row, grimacing up at the board. He always raised his hand to answer questions, but was only correct about 50% of the time. It seemed crazy to Angel to keep putting yourself out there like that, but the next time Mrs. Esposito asked a question, there he was, long skinny arm swinging in the air. Hey, he told her breathlessly once in the hall after class. I thought of a name for you, a math name. For weeks he called her Angle, or sometimes delighting himself still further, obtuse angle. He was so persistent, she felt embarrassed for him, which, along with the tequila shots, explains why she slept with him. Her embarrassment also explains perhaps why she hasn't told him the baby is his.